by May, we have to come out with an absolute firm immigration policy. Otherwise, we're going to be slaughtered in the May elections.
Wow. And
I'm saying that to the leadership, and people are nodding at me. They're not saying, "Oh, that's ridiculous, Edward." I'm saying we're going to have a firm immigration policy. As I said, get out of the ECHR, or you don't have to even say that. You say, get out of any of these conventions that prevent us from arresting people and deporting them. You don't have to have Rwanda. But I've studied this very closely. With Afghanistan, for instance, you simply can't deport people to Afghanistan, Syria. So you have to get rid of all these conventions.
Well, there it is. Sir Edward Leigh, the so-called father of the house, sounded the alarm for the Conservatives. Getting a rock-solid immigration policy sorted by May or face annihilation. Sir Edward, let's be real, you're getting slaughtered anyway. The Conservative Party could promise to personally escort illegal immigrants off the shores themselves, and it still wouldn't matter. Why? Because half the party are basically Labour-lite, and the other half are Lib Dems in disguise. And the actual Conservatives, well, they're like an endangered species, barely hanging on like a panda that refuses to mate. Now all of a sudden, the Tories want out of the ECHR, just like Reform have been shouting about for ages. Well, it's took you long enough. Because let's face it, if you can't deport criminals, scroungers, or people who are actively harming society thanks to European courts meddling in our affairs, then are we even a sovereign nation? Without control of your borders, you might as well call yourself the UK branch of Brussels. And the madness continues. There's been people this week winning asylum cases for the most absurd reasons. One guy gets to stay here because his son prefers British chicken nuggets. Another woman, after being rejected 8 times, wins her 9th appeal by claiming she might be in danger if she goes back. At this rate, I could possibly claim asylum in my own country because I can't find decent fish and chips abroad. And don't get me started on convicted criminals who get to stay because the ECHR says it would violate their rights. What about the rights of actual British citizens?
And what are the odds on Reform and the Tories merging to be one party at the next election?
Oh, I think very high. I mean,
odds on
70%, I should think.
And now we have this bizarre story going round about a Tory Reform merger. Reform merging with the Tories. It's like throwing a life raft to a sinking Titanic. It's pointless and way too late. The Tories are failing, desperately clinging on to relevance, while Reform is actually growing because, shockingly, people prefer a party that does what it says. For 14 years, the Conservatives have betrayed voters, manifesto after manifesto, broken promises after broken promises. People ain't voting Reform because they're curious. They're voting Reform because they've done with the Tory nonsense, and the Tories know it. That's why they're scrambling for a way to ride Reform's success. But it's not happening. The Tory brand is as dead as Blockbuster. Let's see what Richard Tice had to say on the matter.
Well, I can't think of anyone else to ask better than that, well, maybe Nigel Farage, than the deputy leader of that party, Richard Tice, who Richard joins us now. Richard, welcome to State of the Nation. Well, you heard the man there, a 70% chance of you lot merging with that lot, the Tory party. Is it on?
Well, the first thing he said, of course, was the Tories are likely to be slaughtered at the May elections. And I think the Father of the House is bang on right there. Look, with regard to talks of merger, look, forget it. We're just focusing on doing what we're doing. We seem to be doing it rather well because we're now on average 5, 6, 7 points ahead of the Tories. We're going up, they're going south. And I think very soon people are going to say, hang on, the Tories are splitting the vote. We've heard that phrase before, haven't we, Christopher?
Yeah, we have heard that phrase before. During the summer, that's all that we heard from Conservative is to not vote for Reform because we'll be splitting the vote and get Labour in, which is what happened anyway. And regardless of Reform or not, Labour would have got in anyway. Everyone had had enough of Conservative bullshit, let's be honest. But let's see what else he said.
Yeah, but you can't merge with people who fundamentally disagree with you on critical policies. For example, on immigration. the Tories are completely split. They're all over the place on immigration. And the other critical policy where they're with the sort of the eco-zealots, pro-net zero that I think we're going to come on to talk about, we're polar opposites on this. They're quite happy for people's bills and cost of living to be ever higher. They're quite happy for farms to be blighted with solar farms and pylons all across the countryside. These are the damaging consequences of the net zero policy. They're quite happy for jobs to be killed in industries like steel, cars, oil and gas and chemicals. So, yeah, we're poles apart on policies.
And let's talk about the so-called revolution, the net zero revolution. The Tories and the Labour keep promising cheaper bills and more jobs thanks to renewable energy. But all I can see are higher bills and the deindustrialisation of Britain at an Olympic level rate, and yet they call it a green jobs boom. Instead of this suicidal obsession with wind farms that barely power a toaster on a calm day, how about we go all in on nuclear? France does it, China does it. Why are we acting like a caveman, scared of fire? We all want a cleaner environment, but not at the cost of obliterating industry, bankrupting families and relying on China, the world's biggest polluter, to supply us with green tech. It's like setting your house on fire and claiming you're an expert in home insurance. The Tories, to be honest, are doomed. Reform doesn't need them. Net zero is a slow motion economic car crash, and Britain needs to start using common sense before we go from being a first world country to a museum exhibit titled "What Happens When You Deindustrialise and Nobody Else Follows." Right, people, if you like what you heard, had a bit of a laugh, like, comment, subscribe. I'll catch you on the next one, folks.